information because I really have a lot that I want to tell you about. The great news is that we're videoing it. So we've gotten to the point where we're now videoing all of our talks, which means that you can have access to that video afterwards since you attended the class, and that way you can re-watch this. So you don't have to worry about like scribbling every note of a word that comes out of my mouth. There's a spot right here. You want to just go right there. So that's really great, and we're going to cover a lot of topics, and I think everyone's going to find themselves somewhere in that. So, all right, let's get started. So I want you to kind of think about yourself and think if any of these words describe you in some way. Erratic, moody, overly dramatic, spacey, unable to lose weight, overweight, inattentive. Any of those words that apply to you could mean that you have an issue with sugar, because all of those things tie back to the sugar in your diet. All right? So what is sugar? We're going to do a super quick chemistry lesson here. All right? We're not going to get bogged down in this stuff because I know you guys don't care about the chemistry. You just want the answers, right? Got it. So you're not going to study for the test. You're going to wait till the teacher goes through the questions on the test. Okay, so the only reason I wanted to show you this is I want to show you that, first of all, we're going to start with monosaccharides, okay? And they all have the same chemical composition, and I'm not going to spout that to you. You don't care. It doesn't mean anything to you. But what I want you to notice is that these three things look differently, but they're the exact same chemical composition. Okay, that's important because they look different, they act different in the body. Okay, so these are your monosaccharides. You have fructose, you have glucose, and you have galactose. Okay, so glucose is your most basic, and it's required by all cells of the body. Every cell requires glucose. The cells of your brain, the cells of your muscles, the cells of your organs, the cells of your skin. There's a stability ball right over there you can sit on. Yeah. Now I lost my train of thought. That's all right. Oh yeah, and it's the only form that can go directly into your bloodstream without being shunted somewhere else. Okay, galactose is another monosaccharide, so it's a simple sugar, a single sugar, okay? But it must go to the liver first to be converted to glucose. So just this shape difference between this one and this one, it's very minuscule, that difference. But that difference means that it has to go to the liver first. And that's not really important to you except just to understand that all these things act differently in your body, okay? Fructose is absorbed by the liver and then converted, so this one is absorbed by the liver and then the shape changes and converted to glucose before it can ever even be used. So any fructose that goes in your body has to go through that process before it can even be used. So it starts to become something a little bit more fascinating, a little bit more interesting. Fructose those are your fruit sugars. Galactose, those are your milk sugars. That's not important, just a little tidbit of information. Okay? So next we have our disaccharides, and I didn't bother to draw those out because it's the same idea. The same chemical composition, different setup. But we're just going to roll through those because I want you to understand that as we get more complex with our sugars, so those complex carbs that you hear about, they're really no different than your initial sugar. These same single sugars, okay? So a disaccharide means that it takes two of those monosaccharides and they're bonded together. So sucrose, which is your basic table sugar, is a glucose plus a fructose. Okay, so when it goes through your body, that's cleaved and it now becomes single sugars again. You see? All right, lactose is a glucose plus a galactose. That's like a milk sugar. Okay, same thing. It's two. It must be cleaved in order for it to happen, to be used by your body. All right? Then your polysaccharides, these are like your plant foods, your complex carbs, your long chains of sugars. All they are those single sugar molecules added together. Lots and lots of them. So again, they get cleaved down until they're in that simple sugar form to where they can be absorbed by the bloodstream. So what's my point in that? My point in that is just to show you that though we'll learn that there's some differences there, all carbohydrates, whether it's a piece of Ezekiel bread or it's a spoonful of sugar, are the same chemical composition. It's just the length of that chemical composition that makes it different. They all get broken down to those simple single sugar cells. So can you see that? Can you picture that in your mind a little bit? So simple carbs, things that you need to know about simple carbs. Okay, they're digested quickly. They have very few essential vitamins and minerals. They are generally found in refined foods and white foods, but they're also present in milk and fruit. So does that make those things bad? We're going to explore that more in depth as we go. Okay, complex carbs, so those are the super long. The longer the chain, the slower it is to digest. Those long chains include things like fiber, okay, and your plant foods, veggies, whole grains, legumes. They also contain lots of vitamins and minerals. So think of it this way. Let's imagine that I put you in a truck and I kidnapped you and I took you out to a field and I dropped you in the field. Okay, and there was one tree, and that one tree had 2 branches, and there was another tree and it had 57 million branches. And I gave you an axe and I said, you can cut down one tree, I'll see you in the morning. That's your means of staying warm. It's freezing cold out there. Well, clearly, you're going to go to the tree with many branches, and though you're going to work much harder to cut it down, you're going to be warm.
Oh my gosh. I said this when we were talking.
Oh, sugar. You're so clever. I was like, rude. You're so ridiculous. All right, so now, okay, so you're going to cut it down. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's still going to be burning in the morning when I come back to get you. So you will not freeze to death. You will not get frostbite, all that. So think of sugar the same. Just the 2 branches, it burns very quickly. It's gone. You're dead.
You're froze.
Okay, all right. That might be a little exaggeration. But, all right. So anyways, we talk about, you've probably heard of the glycemic index and the glycemic load. Has everybody heard of that before? Right, so these are measurements, I guess we'll call it a measurement, to understand how a sugar in a piece of food reacts with your body. Okay, and so I wrote this down because there's no way I could spout this off to you. So the glycemic index, so it's how quickly they burn in the body. The glycemic index is a ranking based on how quickly the glucose is absorbed. So it compares the increase in blood glucose of 50 grams of the food to 50 grams of pure glucose. Okay, so that's very complex. You don't need to know that. But basically, if you took the exact same grams of, say, watermelon, and you compared it to sugar, the same grams, then sugar is our standard, and watermelon's compared to that. So sugar is a 100, or pure glucose, sorry, not sucrose, but pure glucose is a 100. So white bread would fall in a 70 to 90, depending on the piece of white bread. Whole grain bread would fall 50 to 60, remembering that pure glucose is 100. Okay, but we came to find that there were some serious problems with that glycemic index because it doesn't take into account things like watermelon. Watermelon is very high on the glycemic index, but we know that that's not a bad food, and so that's where they came up with the glycemic load. Okay, so glycemic load, again, I had to write this formula down because nobody really ever uses these, but just so you know what they are, is the glycemic index times the grams of fiber per serving divided by 100. And it allows for fiber's impact on blood sugar. Okay, so glycemic load is ranked 20 plus is considered very high glycemic load. 11 to 19 is a medium, and 1 to 10 is low glycemic load. Okay, so we want foods that are very slow to digest. These things have an inverse effect on diabetes, cravings, and even cancer. Okay, so let's look at 2 foods. How about a watermelon, piece of watermelon, and the equal amount of apple? Okay, so the glycemic index of those, the apple is 36, the watermelon is 76. So you could see that watermelon, by that measurement, would seem like something you wanted to stay away from. But the glycemic load of an apple is 2, watermelon 4. So you can see that differentiation isn't quite so extreme when we add that in. Interestingly, by the rules of glycemic load, honey actually has a lower glycemic load than fast food French fries because of the fiber, which is actually present in honey, and enzymes, digestive enzymes that are not present in French fries. So all fast food is pretty much devoid of fiber, hence the reason fast. Fast to get, fast to digest. So it increases your blood sugar quite quickly. The only time a high glycemic food is a good idea is after exercise. So, all right, one more thing we got to cover, and then we're going to get into the meat of the matter. I'm sweating, I'm talking so fast here. So, digestion. I want to do just a quick trip through the digestive tract. Okay, so we have our mouth, our esophagus, our stomach, our small intestine, our large intestine, the colon, and the rectum. Okay, so carbohydrate digestion actually begins in your mouth. Okay, that's really important to note because the digestion of protein and fats don't actually occur until you they move beyond the stomach. So you can see the difference there in how quickly the breakdown is starting to happen. Even a complex carb, the beginning of digestion begins with the salivary amylase. So that's what's in your saliva. Your saliva is produced in response to food, and that starts that first cleaving of those carbohydrates. So if something starts to digest up here, and something else starts to digest all the way down here, which one would keep you full for longer? Obviously, the fat and the protein would keep you full much longer than a carbohydrate. Okay? So, once it reaches the stomach, there's not as much breakdown that happens there because of the acid, but it moves into the small intestine, and that's where it's finally chopped into disaccharides. There is several ACEs. So ACEs chop up OCEs. OCEs are sugars. ACEs are enzymes. Okay, so this is not really that important to you, but you should just know that that's where it actually all is broken down, and then it's sent to the liver, except for fiber. So this is really cool because then fiber continues to move down, and fiber spends about 72 hours in your colon before it's moved on, and that's important because beneficial fermentation happens there. So we know the American diet is generally quite low in fiber, and so what happens is when that fermentation doesn't happen, then you don't have the beneficial bacteria that comes from that and promotes good gut health. Also, that fiber sits there for 72 hours because toxins in your body actually bind to it and then remove it from your body. So a low fiber diet prevents this from happening and allows those toxins to stay in your body for longer periods of time. All right. So now, the good stuff. Okay? We're going to talk about results of sugar consumption, and we're going to talk pretty in-depth. None of what we're talking about is in your packet because I wanted your packet to be all the good stuff to take home with you and read, just so you know that. All right, so results of sugar consumption. Today we're going to talk about mineral depletion, immune suppression, blood sugar imbalance, brain function, and inflammation. So we've got 5 things that we've got to hit on. We should have plenty of time, so feel free. I'll slow down at this point, and you can feel free to interject with questions as we go along. All right, so we're going to start with mineral depletion. So the effects of mineral depletion come from all refined foods, but it's specifically table sugar that this relates the most to. So I want you to think about table sugar for just a moment. There's no fiber, no minerals, no enzymes, no fats, no proteins. Okay, the refining process and the bleaching of the sugar cane removes all of those things. So picture for me a sugar beet or a sugar cane. It's a plant, right? So if you were to find that plant to eat it, it would actually have minerals, it would have some protein, it would have some sort of fat, and all of those, and it would have vitamins. All of those things would be present. But when we boil it down and we remove all that material, those things are taken out. So the body, so we have nothing, right, but sucrose, pure disaccharide. That's what we're talking about here, table sugar. Okay, so the body must borrow the vital nutrients that are necessary for digestion to occur that are already existing in your body. Okay, so those would include calcium, sodium, potassium, magnesium, B1, which is thiamine, and more. Specifically, your B vitamins are stolen from your body in order to digest sugar. Those things would be present if you were eating the actual sugar cane. Can you see the difference in that? So if I eat a piece of watermelon, it has fructose, which is a single sugar. We already talked about that. Yes, single sugar. We already talked about that. And then, but it also has all the vitamins and nutrients present that my body needs to do something and digest the sugars that are present. Versus if I eat straight table sugar, there's nothing present there but sugar. So it must steal calcium from my bones, magnesium from every cell in the body, my B vitamins, because those things are necessary for the cleaving of that sucrose molecule. Okay? So osteoporosis, arthritis, leg cramps, PMS, low back pain, ADD, and depression all relate back to depletion of those minerals that we just spoke about. Sugar loads, so after consumption of sugar, your mineral loss in your sweat is increased 300% for the next 12 hours. So when you eat something that's high in sugar, for the next 12 hours, not only does your body steal those minerals in order for the digestion to occur, it secretes them in your sweat as a response to the sugar. Hormones are hard hit by sugar consumption as well. Mineral depletion caused by sugar messes up the acid-alkaline balance in your body. So in response to that, your body must lower the acid in your stomach in order to bring total acid down. Okay, so let's stop there for a second because some of you may have never heard me talk about acid in the stomach before, and you may not understand that you don't want your stomach acid low. So stomach acid is intended to be quite acidic, okay? And so when that stomach acid is reduced or made more basic, even by just 1 or 2 notches, it prevents the proper digestion of food. Additionally, you have a mucus lining inside your stomach. If your stomach is not acidic enough, the mucus lining starts to deplete and go away. So why do you care about that? Because that's where the important connectors with things like iron and B12 are. So picture it this way. Think of iron as being like in the shape of a star, okay? If the mucus lining of your stomach produces something that's the shape of an arrow, and they have to combine. You have to have a star with an arrow for your body to recognize it and say, oh, this is iron. Let's take that in. That's good. If it's just a star, it passes on by. So that mucus lining is really important. Even more important maybe to some of you is that if the acid levels aren't acidic enough, a message is never sent to your esophagus to fully close. So then the acid that is in your stomach, though not fully acidic, it is still acidic, comes back up, and that's where you have GERD. GERD is not a problem of high stomach acid. GERD is a problem of low stomach acid. The acid must be elevated to send a signal for the esophagus to shut completely. So then people with GERD are given acid reducers, which further lowers it. Does it take care of the problem? Yes. But then it messes with your digestion, your mucus lining, your B12 absorption, and your iron absorption as well. It's fixing it because it's literally getting rid of the acid, not because it's fixing the problem. Okay, so it's really important to note. Sugar is doing that same thing. Sugar consumption high makes your body acidic where it should not be acidic. Okay, so then the easiest thing for your body to do in response to that is lower the acid in your stomach because it can control that. Now your overall acid-alkaline balance can get closer to normal. But you've got a whole new slew of problems. You've got GERD, you've got B12 deficiency, you've got iron deficiency, and that's on top of the minerals that have already been depleted from your body to process the sugar that you ate. All right. Perfect. All right. So the original plant was a complex carbohydrate, but the refining process removed everything but the simple sugar. So some key minerals that are depleted by sugar consumption or too much sugar consumption. Calcium. Okay, sugar and osteopenia are directly linked due to the strong pull on calcium by sugar. So ways that you can bring calcium back into your diet. All of your greens, full-fat milk. Full-fat milk is much, much higher in absorbable calcium than skim milk. You should never let that nasty stuff touch your lips. Skim milk is terrible. But it's important to know that calcium requires ample magnesium and vitamin D, which we've already said are also depleted by sugar. Magnesium works to relax muscle contractions, and it works with calcium for strong bones. Okay, so we know here at the gym we've talked a lot about magnesium and about how cramping of the muscles and soreness in the muscles comes back to magnesium. So here's a little tidbit for you. It requires 56 molecules of magnesium to process just 1 molecule of sugar. So it's no wonder that we're very, very depleted and deficient in magnesium. Some food sources of magnesium are salmon, sesame, pumpkin seeds, and spinach. Your B vitamins are depleted by sugar, specifically thiamine, which is your B1. It's really important because it's important for phase 1 detoxification of the liver. That must be present for your liver to detoxify itself. It's necessary for energy, and it can be found in veggies, seeds, whole grains, and legumes. Okay? You might want to take a couple of notes here if you think that mineral depletion might be an issue for you, because these are some great natural mineral restoration foods. Seaweed, Epsom salt bath. I always tell everyone that because that's the easiest one of all. And I mean, you could be like, I'm prescribed an Epsom salt bath, babe. Gotta go. Okay? High mineral sea salt. So stop using just regular table salt. Himalayan salt, red lava salt, Hawaiian black salt. All of those have Celtic sea salt. They all have a much higher mineral count in it. I said seaweed already, right? Yep. Okay. Bone broth. Make your own bone broth. When you're done with a chicken, throw it back in the crock pot. All the bones and everything. Cover it with water, a little bit of apple cider vinegar. It'll draw all those minerals out of the bones. You can use that then to make all your soups and stocks. Your family will never know. I know because it sounds weird, but it's good stuff. Nuts, seeds, and then fresh green juices. It's important to note here I'm not talking about juices that you buy at Publix. Those are required to be pasteurized. Okay? Pasteurization depletes the minerals and the enzymes that are naturally present in your green juices. So I'm talking about green juices that you make or you go to the juice box and get, or I don't even know who else sells fresh pressed green juices. Anthony's. Yeah, fresh pressed green juices are there. Oh, and for fun, a sweetener that you can use that's really high in minerals is blackstrap molasses. So that's a really good one. So it's good to know that so that you can have that. So you can start to think of sugar as an anti-nutrient. Okay? So it's not just devoid of nutrients, it's an anti-nutrient. It literally steals minerals from the body and it leaves the body depleted, which leads you, and this is the take-home point here, if your body is devoid of minerals, or stolen minerals are stolen from the body, what's your natural way of telling yourself you need something? You crave food, right? So if you're naturally going to crave something, and then you have a mineral depletion, so you see then you start to get hungry, but you're depleted of minerals, and then you grab for the wrong things, but you get hungry, so you automatically have cravings and an insatiable appetite. How many of you have ever been on a diet and you were absolutely insatiable? It means you ate all your calories and you're like, that's it? Because you were avoiding fats or you were avoiding proteins and you could just never get full. That's what was going on. The carbohydrate load was so high that it was taking those minerals from your body so that you could never actually feel full. Because though you were possibly eating enough calories, who knows, you weren't getting the nutrients that you needed for your body to recognize that it was full. Okay? Whew. One down. Immune repression. All right? So sugar affects us by suppressing the immune system. Right? This is specifically true because of the lack of the mineral zinc, which is one of the minerals that's depleted by the consumption of sugar. Okay? So in the presence of sugar, they've actually taken sugar and they've put it in petri dishes with white blood cells. And the function of the white blood cells is dramatically reduced, directly proportionate to the amount of sugar present in the petri dish. So it's really interesting to note because what time of year do we get the most sick? Around the holidays, right? Isn't that also the time of year when we eat the most sugar? What an interesting correlation that you could make there. All right, upper respiratory infections seem to always follow times of high sugar intake, like right after the holidays. Sugar consumption decreases your ability to fight disease. And the constant immune response to sugar exhausts the body, opening the door for viruses and infections to come through. All right, so high blood sugar, the sugar floating in your blood, is not only an immune suppressant, but it actually fights against vitamin C, which is a natural fighter of disease in your body. Okay? Sugar encourages inflammation, which distracts the immune cells from fighting foreign matter. So when you have inflammation in the body, your immune cells say, oh, let's take care of this inflammation, and totally lets everybody else by, ignores everything else that's going on. Additionally, because now we've talked about how your acidity of your stomach level is lower, that's your #1 defense against E. coli, food poisoning of any kind of foodborne pathogen. Your stomach should be acidic enough that you could literally eat poop and be fine. Like you could. Like your stomach would kill it. You know, I mean, think about that for a second. Do you think the Indians washed their hands with antibacterial soap after they cleaned some deer? No, they didn't have anything like that. You know, they just washed it in a stream and kept on going, right? They had their baby poops. I mean, they couldn't get that stuff out from under their fingernails. I mean, what are they doing, right? I'm just telling you. Just saying. Sugar feeds tumor growth. The cells of the tumor feed on glucose specifically. We don't, as adults, have very many actively growing cells in our body, right? We're here, we're made, we're the size, we're what we're going to be. Our cells, there's not as many actively growing cells in an adult unless they're cancer or tumor cells. Okay, so the cancer and tumor cells consume sugar anywhere from 10 to 50% higher rate than a regular cell. So increased blood sugar and increased consumption of sugar has been shown time and again in research studies to increase the rate and the progression of breast cancer. It's important. There's a documented link between the death from cancer and impaired glucose tolerance. It is an independent predictor of cancer mortality. Your consumption of sugar is an independent predictor, regardless of your genetics, regardless of what you were like prior to finding out you had cancer. Your consumption of sugar is a stronger link in that. Okay? So we'll just move right on past that, immune suppression, and we're going to jump into number 3, which is blood sugar imbalance. Okay, so we're going to ride the train. Some of you have heard me kind of talk about this before. You consume sugar, right? Your blood sugar rises. Your body releases insulin to utilize the sugar in the bloodstream for fuel. So how that works basically is insulin works like a key. So all the cells in your muscles and in your body, in your brain, whatever, they have these little locks on them. And insulin comes in, and there's a gate, and it sticks its little key in, and the gate comes open, and that's how blood sugar comes in, and your body can use it. So blood sugar, we're speaking specifically about glucose, okay? Because that's what's in your blood is glucose. All right, so that's important because as you consume more sugar, you receive more insulin. And over time, this process happens very quickly as you consume more sugar. So then...
No, it's right here.
Do you have a visitor?
No, it's right, yeah.
A little spider?
No, it's right here. It's like right there.
Oh, it's like literally in front of you. No. He's like Charlotte's web.
Where?
Oh. He's literally the size of a piece of dust. Promise. And it's gone. Ian saved the day. Ian. All right. So as more blood sugars consumed, more insulin is released. The faster those gates open, the faster the glucose rushes in. You feel better really fast, and then it's gone really fast, and you crash just as fast. Okay, so we all know that feeling. You've eaten some cookie dough or like a bunch of candy at Halloween, right? And you're like, oh! You know, you've seen it. Kids, you can see it really well in kids, even more because they're not as accustomed to it. They don't have the impulse control to understand what's going on. So you can really see that in children. They've had a party at school where they've given them so much sugar, it's just ridiculous, and then you see them crash. Okay, so that's important because over time, as your blood sugar is quite high, and this insulin is continually like, whoosh, your gates are going like this, and then they get stuck shut, and they're done. The locks are jammed. They can't take it anymore. There's been too much insulin. They're jammed. So now you have an even bigger problem, and that problem is that the sugar can't go into the muscles and the cells anymore, and instead it's floating free in your blood. And that's a really high, so that's that high blood sugar that we talk about. You've had a fasting glucose test, okay? So I'm going to read this part just because it'll catch me back up to where I was. Over time, insulin production increases the opening of the gates faster and allowing the glucose to flow out of the blood faster. Thus, you hit the wall, you have a drop in blood sugar, and immediately your cravings for sugar begin to increase in order to bring back homeostasis. The tissues become insensitive to the insulin and the gates stay locked. Thus, high blood sugar, the sugar is floating around. It's interesting to note that type 2 diabetes was not documented until 1935, though type 1 diabetes has been documented medically since the very first medical documentation. So type 2 diabetes is it's a disease of modernity, okay? It is because of present times and the way that we eat now. Even in 1935 is so drastically different from the way that we ate ancestrally. Okay, so just a note, a fasting blood glucose should be 85 to 100 milligrams per deciliter. So if anybody's had that test or has one of those at home, or whatever might be going on over there. Our ancestors, so a primal person, but prior to like the Industrial Revolution, prior to mass farming, prior to packaged foods, ate 80 grams of carbohydrates a day, compared to the standard American diet, and where many people eat up to and over 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. It's a far cry from where our bodies are meant to be, right? Because though it seems like a lot of time, biologically speaking, that's not much time. From an evolutionary or whatever you believe, doesn't really matter, but from the standards of your body changing to deal with the environment at hand, from our ancestors who ate 80 grams a day to us now who eat up to 300 plus grams a day is nothing but that on the span of human time. I mean, that's as far as it is. Maybe not even that far. I might have jumped too big there. It's very small. Okay? Childhood obesity rates have tripled, and type 2 diabetes is also at alarming rates in both children and adults. It's epidemic. Okay? It's also important to note that the sugar, this free-floating sugar in the cells that's not stored by the liver and muscles, is glycogen. So, right, we want some extra. That's our glycogen. glycogen stores. Those are there. It's like our backup tank. It's like a tank of gas you carry around in your car. Don't do that. It's dangerous, but you know, in case you run out. Okay? So you want that there, but once those are full, that sugar is then stored as fat. Okay, so I want you to think of this foods in terms of a slow train and a fast train, right? So your sugar is like a fast train. Your refined foods, your processed foods, those are fast trains. They're going so fast that they could derail. Your slow train, right, takes longer to get there, but it stays the course. It stays on the track. Think of this also. If you take a slow train and you put a fast train behind it, how fast can the fast train move? Only as fast as the slow train. So that's really important to us because what have we already talked about is slow to process in the body? Fat, fiber, and protein. So if you took those items and combined them with something that had a faster train effect, a carbohydrate, all of a sudden the fast train can't move so fast anymore. Okay, so it's a really great visual for you to think of. So instead of eating a piece of toast for breakfast, right, if we instead, fat, fiber, protein, even just change that to a bowl of oatmeal with some almond butter and maybe an egg on the side, suddenly those carbohydrates in the oatmeal are no longer a concern so much because they're stuck behind fat, fiber, protein. See that? Okay. I want to take a second here to talk about alcohol. But I'm out. Peace out. Especially about Moscato. Kool-Aid with, it's like Kool-Aid and seltzer. It says it right here in my notes. It must be true. All right. So this is a really interesting, and this might hit home for some of you. It's really interesting to note the link between alcoholism and sugar addiction. The two are inseparable, okay? They work exactly the same in the body. So the link is, let me just read it because I'll mess it up. Hypoglycemia has a documented prevalence amongst alcoholics. Children with sugar addiction have a higher inclination towards alcohol and drug abuse, both because of the underlying imbalance and the learned pattern of feeding the craving. It's not an issue of willpower, but rather of equilibrium. Indulgence of one, alcohol or sugar, makes it harder to refrain from the other. And I think you can probably see this in your life too, around the holidays. It's a great example. Or you might think of it in terms of, well, here's where it gets me often. Let's say I've had lunch, but I haven't had anything else, and on the way home, all I can think about is that glass of wine. Like, oh, I can pour a glass of wine as soon as I get home. You know, it's wine, so it has like antioxidants and stuff, right? So it's very healthy. But it's actually just a need to elevate my blood sugar back up. Because if I put something else in my mouth, that need for a glass of wine goes away. But there's a lot of really interesting research on people who struggle with alcohol and that concurrent struggle with sugar. And so we won't go into depth on that because that's not really what we're talking about. But I just did want to put that out there. If you know someone that struggles with those things, it's something to consider what the imbalance of sugar might be in their life that could be playing a role in that. Okay? All right, we've got two more. Brain chemistry and inflammation. Okay, so brain chemistry. Get ready. We're going to talk about neurochemicals here. All right, so serotonin. Everybody's heard of serotonin, right? It's our feel-good chemical. It quiets the brain. It controls appetite. Think of it as like brakes for the brain. It's what inhibits violent reactions. Okay? When you have low levels of serotonin, you have high carbohydrate cravings, you have increased PMS, you have reduced sleep, increased anxiety, increased fretting, increased impulse, and increased anger. Okay? Depression is a result of low serotonin. Now, 95% of the serotonin in the body is actually produced in the gut. Yet another reason to have a healthy gut. We've already talked about sugar's role in the gut, right? We don't even need to go back and review that. But serotonin in the brain is actually produced in the brain by converting tryptophan. Okay, so serotonin and insulin are intertwined. Okay, when insulin is quite low, serotonin is also quite low. So that's interesting because we can note here that the key to all of this is balance in the diet. So when that insulin drops, right, after the keys have gone in and the blood sugar and all that, and your insulin is quite low, that's when your serotonin is quite low. What controls your appetite? That's serotonin. So when you're riding that wave of insulin, this is happening throughout the day, right? We're understanding how this ties in. So that is also increasing your need for sugar at that point. Okay, so your need then becomes a need for a boost. So you reach for something sugary, but it's a false feeling. And it's created actually by adrenaline produced by the adrenal glands, not by an increase in serotonin. So tryptophan is your key for increased serotonin. I know you know tryptophan's in turkey, but it's actually present in a lot of other things, and so you could consider some of these things, including them in your diet, if this is something that you know is an issue for you. Shrimp, tamari, tuna, spinach, turkey, cod, liver, salmon, pumpkin seeds, and very interestingly, my runners are going to love this, repetitive movement increases the production of serotonin in your brain. It can be as simple as chewing a piece of gum. You've heard the strategy before, to chew a piece of gum and see if your hunger goes away. Knitting. In mothers, nursing. That's why nursing brings such calming effect to the mother and the baby, the release of serotonin from the repetitive movement or the repetitive motion of the actual nursing. Okay? However, this is key. That tryptophan only works for you under the influence of B vitamins and magnesium. So what's depleted by too much sugar? B vitamins and magnesium. Okay, next, beta endorphins. So these are the brain's painkillers. This is what allows a mother to lift the car off of a child. It allows you to run from a saber-toothed tiger. That's your beta endorphins. You can't even feel your quads burning because you're just like going for it. Saber-toothed tiger, it could happen. Zombie, how about that? Is that bringing it in?
I just remember something.
Okay. All right. So this is really interesting. So low beta endorphins. And I know you know someone like this. Low beta endorphins, when someone's beta endorphins are low, it's someone who fears pain. They're afraid to go to the dentist. They're quite sensitive emotionally. They respond very extreme to criticisms. Their self-esteem is low. Their coping mechanisms are very low. And they often feel stuck or inadequate. Those are low beta endorphins. Create all of that. Okay, so beta endorphins are an endogenous opioid. There you go. It's a neurochemical produced naturally by eating and drinking, but also by the drug morphine. Okay? Heroin is a beta endorphin drug. Okay, so this is important to note because a recovering addict almost never makes it past from heroin, almost never makes it because it takes over 6 months to get past those feelings of low self-esteem caused by the reduced beta endorphins because they had such high ones with heroin prior. Sugar temporarily elevates those beta endorphins. So people with low self-esteem seek out sugar to feel better, but it's not a real fix. Research shows that the beta endorphins are only activated by just the taste. So you can actually eat foods that are pleasurable without the refined sugar and have the same effect. You reach for the sugar out of habit, not out of need. Okay? Beta endorphins also drop just before your menstrual cycle, hence the spike in cravings prior to that. So think of it this way. Sugar sensitivity involves a carbohydrate sensitivity. Think of it as like a stool with 3 legs. Okay? A carbohydrate sensitivity caused by blood sugar imbalance, low beta endorphins, or serotonin. You've got these 3 things. If any one of those is off, your stool will wobble, right? So those are all things that you have to pay attention to. But those with low beta endorphins often skate by because you don't see the effects in their weight. Okay? They generally have the highest addiction but the lowest prevalence of weight issues. So these people, you know, like that skinny person, you're like, she can eat whatever she wants, blah, 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 blah. But they're like addicted to sugar. That's that person. Okay? The last one that we're going to cover is dopamine. Okay? So the taste of sugar alone also releases opiates in the brain. Just the taste. So these are associated with pleasure, euphoria, motivation, the ability to do something now that benefits us later. They're made from the amino acid tyrosine, not from sugar. Okay? So sugar activates dopamine release just like drugs and alcohol. Okay? So it's no wonder we turn to sugar when we're stressed out or we deserve a reward for all of our hard work. We're trying to get that dopamine effect. Okay? It's a cry for dopamine. But the same effect can come from almonds, avocado, dairy, bananas, or a daily dose of fermented cod liver oil, which has both your A and D. How you been doing with that, Rosa? Oh, gosh. Comes in pill form.
Yeah, but who made me buy the liquid form? Because it's better. It's better.
Grow up. It's way better for you. All right, last one we're going to touch on, and that's inflammation. We're going to fly through it. So inflammation, silent, systemic inflammation is linked to diabetes, asthma, autoimmune disease, cancer, dementia, autism, depression, and anxiety. The immune system response when repair is needed is inflammation. The brain itself can get inflamed too. As a matter of fact, MRIs of autistic children when compared to regular children show that the brain is much larger in these children, and that's due to an inflammation. Okay? So these inflammations of the brain can be caused by toxins, stress, nutritional deficiencies, food allergies, and sugar. Okay? Inflammation is the root cause of all chronic disease, and we must understand the root to fix the problem. Chronic low-grade systemic inflammation can show up as eczema, autoimmune disease, ADD, ADHD, diabetes, high blood pressure, and even extreme anger and aggression. Okay? When the body is in a persistent state of repair reaction, that's low-grade inflammation. You start by looking at the gut. Again, we already talked about sugar's effects on the gut. When the gut function is impaired, that's where the ability to quell the fire of inflammation starts. Another factor that you can look at for impaired inflammation or inflammation in the body is increased LDL. So on that cholesterol panel, when your LDL is high, it's actually a system that it's actually a sign that the body is trying to clean up that low-grade inflammation, and it actually doesn't have any link to heart disease whatsoever. It's just telling you that there's inflammation in the body. Okay? High triglyceride is a better predictor of heart disease than total cholesterol or LDL cholesterol. So, we just want to make one more quick note on one other thing, and that's yeast overgrowth. I'm not going to talk about that in detail. That's like a class in itself. It's very common, particularly in women. But if you have extreme sugar cravings and you've tried very hard with many of the steps that are in that packet, and you're not getting anywhere, another thing to consider would be a yeast overgrowth. So yeast is natural in the gut. It's a natural bacteria that occurs in the gut. It should be there, but what happens is that when the sugar consumption is too high, those bacteria, so the bad bacteria, overproduce. And you can think of it like, you guys I'm sure have done like a sourdough bread starter on your counter before, and you feed it every day and the bag gets real big, and that's kind of that feeling that you have, like a bloated, gassy. Oftentimes that can link back to an overgrowth of bad bacteria in the gut. That is a class in itself though, so we're not going to touch on yeast overgrowth. Oh, wait, I'm not done actually. We have to go over the solutions. All right. We forgot that part. All right, so first of all, I want to tell you that your solution when you're looking at foods, we're going to talk about the labels for just a second. So when you're looking at a food label, all right, and you know there's like that total carbohydrates, okay? So total carbohydrates, and then under that it'll say sugars. So a neat little visual you can do for yourself. Take that sugars and divide it by the number 4. So if there's 16 sugars and you divide by 4, how many's there? 4. Okay? That's how many packets, like coffee house sugar, like sugar that comes, that's how many packets is in a serving of whatever you're eating. So that's a really great little visual aid that you can do for yourself to take that number of sugars, divide it by the number of 4, and whatever you come up with, that's how much is in a serving, and that's assuming you're measuring out a serving, of course, right? You're not eating 2 and 3 servings. So I really like that little visual aid to give people. Okay, but grams of sugar can be tricky. Okay, so take, for example, like a Lara bar. The ingredients of a Lara bar is literally like nuts, dates, and there might be one other thing in there, but it's like 3 ingredients. Okay, but the sugars on that will look very high. At that point, we look at the ingredients, because though the sugars would be quite high, there would be fiber, there would be fat, there would be all of our slow trains there, fat, fiber, protein, to slow down the effects of that sugar on the body. Okay? So you can eat sweets, but you want to start to think of sweets in terms of that fat, fiber, and protein. So looking for recipes, and though I'm not telling you to go paleo, the paleo community has a lot of great options for that. One of the things that we use at our house, it's quite simple. We just put in a food processor some dates, some cocoa powder, like a tablespoon or 2 of water until it becomes like a ball. We roll them, and then we just roll them in coconut. And so they're like little Almond Joy balls. It's that simple. Oh, they have almonds in them too. So almonds first, and then dates. There it is. And then a little bit of water, cocoa, and then roll it. So it's like an Almond Joy in a little ball, but it's got all your fat, fiber, protein, right? So a little sweet treat to mix in with. So when you're going to beat sugar, these are some key little things, and there's more tips for you, and these are actually all in your packet. You don't have to write them down or anything. They may not be like in a specific order in there, but it's in there. Okay? Number 1, you must start with yourself. You can't go home. If this is a real problem for you, you can't go home and worry about your household, like the whole family is going to do this, or your husband, or your spouse, or anything. You've got to worry about you first. You've got to get yourself under control and be focused just on yourself. Specifically, if you came to our class on Monday and learned that you're an obliger, you definitely need to just focus on yourself first. Okay? And not worry about anyone else. All right? A great tactic can be to keep a food mood journal. So every hour, set your phone to go off and just write down what your mood is throughout the day. Anytime you put something in your mouth, write the time down, write the food down. Just do it for a couple of days. You'll start to see some patterns in where you're dropping and you're reaching. Drop, reach, drop, reach. You'll start to see that pattern happen over and over. Understanding your patterns is really key to success because everybody's just a little bit different. Okay? Another tactic that's really important is just to start bringing it from the subconscious to the conscious. So you think you know it's healthy. I imagine if you start reading some labels, you'll start to find that maybe they're not as healthy as you thought they were. Okay, so like Kids Organic Yummy-O cereal probably has 8 or 9 different kinds of sugar in the ingredients, but you bought it because it was an organic Yummy-O cereal and you thought you were giving your kids something healthy. It's not to say you stop it right now, just bring it from subconscious to conscious. Once you start to be aware of it, you start to think about it differently, and that's the first step. Okay? A great tactic when you're trying to get rid of the sugar in your diet is called crowding it out. Okay, so not saying you have to stop eating anything, but you have to start eating a bunch of other stuff that's really good. And so you crowd it out of your diet because as you eat these other things, the satisfaction, the minerals, all these things are much higher, and then it's much easier. Have you used that tactic? Is that why you're shaking your head?
Yeah, I like it. I like that.
Yeah, it's really the best way to do it. If you try to go cold turkey with it, It can be done, but it's just very, very, very difficult. The best way to do it is crowd it out. The easiest time to do it is to start with breakfast, because your willpower is the highest in the morning. All of your brain chemicals are best in the morning, so you're not fighting those things. Your just nothing gets in your way in the morning. You know, you can wake up 20 minutes earlier, but when it's the end of the day and everything's falling apart, that's not the time to be like, I'm going to make a very healthy dinner and not grab for any sugar. But if you started in the morning, then you've created this full effect throughout the day that's just going to play into the evening. And research shows that eating a high-fat, fiber, and protein breakfast correlates dramatically at dinner to a lower calorie consumption from 5 p.m. and beyond. So, I mean, they've shown that 1 million times in multiple studies, so it's a really big one. Okay? So, also it's important to remove negative feelings about how you fed yourself and your family. Up till this point, you didn't know what you're walking out of here knowing. So if you don't know it, you can't do anything about it. Obviously, if you knew it was terrible for your children, you would not have done it, right? Nobody wants to purposely hurt their children. The problem is now you do know. And so you've got to move forward and take care of yourself and thus your kids, your family, and those things like that. If you just can't get over the hump, and you guys know how against juice fasts I am. I've talked about it 1 million times. This would be the one instance where a juice, like a green juice, not the stuff you buy at Publix, and not a long period of time, I'm talking like 48 hours of just bone broth and like green juices, this would be a time where that is very appropriate. If you've tried, you can't beat the sugar cravings, this is a great opportunity that I could get behind you on that. But I would tell you that you would need support so that when you're coming off of that, you're coming off of it with a system in mind for how to move forward. Okay? All right. That's our time. If you have questions, you can email them to me, becca@hakafitness.net. I'll compose them all with answers, and that email will go out to everyone that came to the talk. You'll also get a video of this talk. So if you were just like, wow, my eyes are spinning, you'll get that video and you can watch it and pause it as needed. All right, you guys, thanks for coming. I'll stick around if you have any questions too. I'm happy to help you with that. What's the